Despite the disappointing year in 2024, the Michigan Wolverines brought a ton of talent to the NFL draft this year. Two guys stand out over the rest: defensive lineman Mason Graham and cornerback Will Johnson. While it's hard to compare players of different positions, someone's got to be higher on my big board. And that's what I'm going to decide on today. Which Michigan prospect is the better of the two? Let's find out. In contrast with my previous settling the debate videos, since they were offensive linemen and these guys are separate positions, these two will just receive their own mini detailed scouting reports. Let's begin with Mason Graham, who was a 4-star recruit in the 2022 recruiting class. He played for the same high school football team as Tetairoa McMillan and Noah Fafita. He committed to play for Michigan out of his 13 offers, where he started one game and played over 300 snaps his freshman year. He became the full-time starter his sophomore season and continued his reign during his junior season. When it was all said and done, he finished his collegiate career with 108 tackles, 75 stops, and 9 sacks on nearly 1,300 defensive snaps. After a very good junior year, Mason Graham forewent his senior eligibility and decided to enter the 2025 NFL Draft. How does Graham stack up as an NFL prospect? Well, I'll let the analysis and the tape do the talking. In the pass rush game, Mason Graham pans out as above average. This is primarily because of the athletic traits that are involved with pass rushing, but I'll go trait by trait here. Graham's first step and explosiveness off the line might be his best trait as a defensive tackle. He's got a ridiculously good get-off and explodes forward with great speed on top of it. On so many occasions, Graham won reps because of the interior offensive linemen not being able to keep up with that explosiveness. Having that first step allows for him to win with explosiveness, but also lunge forth with a fun bull rush that I don't think he utilizes enough. The moves that I noticed he uses the most are his swing moves and also just moves that involve a minimal amount of contact and a lot of elusiveness. But given his general success with his decent pass rush arsenal, this is a section he wins. What Graham does struggle with though is countering that first move if it does not work. If the offensive line can stop his initial finesse move, he's had minimal success still winning the rep. While this is normal for defensive tackles, especially of his size, there's a different level of struggle for these guys. Graham has a concerning level of struggle. And while minor, Graham's pad level also needs some tooling. He will run into reps too high, which heightens the possibility of him getting stuck at the offensive line. But as we move into the run defense aspect of his game, it becomes clear just how much he gets stuck at the line of scrimmage. Graham's block deconstruction seriously needs work. He's still working on using his hands at better levels, and while he makes up for it with his very good agility and finesse moves, it's going to get harder for him to get away with it at the next level. This does tie into the counter moves that Graham struggles with, so overall, this whole bunch of traits he just needs to fix. I think he can be successful with his play strength, it's just fine. He shows it most in his leg drive and in his bull rush, but he just generally struggles to use that strength to detach from blocks. The only reason I didn't grade his play strength higher is because I don't think he uses it efficiently. Everything else I'm about to discuss in this run defense skill set though, it's better than the first two traits here. Beginning with another runner for his best trait, gap control. What Graham really does well is if he can't win by deconstructing the block, he will stay on the line of scrimmage, jump off the block, and fill in the open gaps. That's what Mason Graham does extremely well in the run game. It actually reminds me a lot of what another Michigan defensive tackle used to do, but Graham had a lot more collegiate success than Mazi Smith did. Graham as a tackler is very intriguing, but he did immensely improve on that in 2024. He missed 15.4% of his tackles during his sophomore campaign, but only missed 2 tackles and a 4.8 overall rate in 2024. Great improvement to track as he jumps to the NFL. Finally, his diagnostic skills are very good as well. He's able to diagnose where the run is going, or if the run is a facade, or anything in between. That's another reason why his gap control is so elite, because he can understand what gap might be manipulated by the back. If he's there, that's not possible. Alright, I've already sneak peeked Graham's athleticism through his first step and his finesse moves, so no surprise that this section is great. And this section begins with his agility, which pans out as fantastic. As I've previously mentioned, most of his finesse moves wouldn't be possible without his great agility. I wouldn't say it's perfect, as I have seen better before, but it's hard to say I've seen better in a guy of Graham's size. But the agility isn't all that he brings. Graham also puts forth great flexibility that will really help him at the next level. He's able to get low and get around blockers' reach with minimal struggle. At the same time though, there is one thing holding this back from being even better, and that trait is his balance. He does fall off balance way too often, like a concerning amount. But I rewatched some of those clips and noticed that he's falling off balance because he's trying to make those superhuman flexible moves. Sometimes those moves go heavily in his favor, and other times he just goes off balance. The final athletic trait to discuss is his speed, which gives him high potential as a versatile 4-3 D lineman. He showed at Michigan that he could win off the edge with speed, and even in chase down situations or QB hurry situations, he isn't completely out of the picture once the quarterback begins to scramble. Finally, let me go over Graham's vitals, which pan out as good for the next level. Graham's measurables are above average to me. While his height and weight are very good, he does have shorter arms that could also contribute to his aforementioned mediocre block deconstruction. A- here. As for medicals, Graham did miss a couple games with a hand injury his sophomore year and was briefly pulled out of fall camp his junior year. Nothing too concerning for this section. I already mentioned the alignment versatility, as it isn't crazy good just yet, but the potential is there because he's shown he can win off the edge. Would really only have that versatility in 4-3 schemes nonetheless, or 4-2-5. Finally, Graham's production as a pass rusher felt underwhelming, but he still had 75 run stops, which will bring intrigue from scouts. Alright, that's enough on Mason Graham. It's time to switch gears here and start talking about Will Johnson. Johnson was a highly touted 5-star composite prospect out of the 2022 recruiting class, ranked first in the state of Michigan. He received 28 offers but decided to stay in-state to play for the Wolverines. Johnson took over as starter in the middle of his freshman year, getting his first starting nod in Week 10 against Rutgers. He kept the job from that point on and went on to play over 1,300 defensive snaps. He was a freshman All-American his freshman year and a consensus All-American his sophomore year. All in all, Johnson registered 68 tackles, 10 pass breakups, and 9 interceptions with 3 pick sixes. He forewent his senior season and entered the 2025 NFL Draft just like Graham. Now we discuss Johnson as a prospect, and it's time to determine if he's actually better than Graham. I will add this. Consensus right now has Mason Graham ahead of Will Johnson, but it's really close. As I mentioned with Travis Hunter, coverage is obviously the most important trait in a cornerback. Obviously you don't want an unathletic guy there, but you could also have a freak athlete who struggles in coverage, and that's harder to maintain than the unathletic DB. Luckily for Johnson, he has both coverage capabilities and athleticism, but sticking to coverage here, he brings forth some very good anticipation that I initially didn't like, but came out strong in the end. His click and close instincts are fantastic, and he does a great job sniffing out route breaks before they actually happen. If that sounds like it's not real, just turn on the 2023 tape and then get back to me. Afterwards, he also brings forth nearly perfect ball skills. Here's some food for thought. In his sophomore and junior seasons combined, Johnson had 63 targets thrown his way. He picked off 9.5% of those targets and deflected another 11.1% of those targets. He had a combined 13 breakups and picks, and allowed only 33 catches in that same time span. Oh, and his 3 pick sixes that I've already mentioned too. Yeah, that applies here. Anywho, how about different kinds of coverages? As we begin close to the receiver in press coverage, this is actually where I think Johnson struggles. Not because his press reps were bad or anything, but he will sometimes look super uncomfortable when his eyes aren't on the quarterback, unless the route is going vertical. So for press coverage, his eyes won't be on the QB initially, and he might look uncomfortable as the rep goes forth. The likelihood of this goes away as he gets further from the receiver, as he looks good in off-man coverage. This is where he gets the most opportunities to show his great anticipation, and with those instincts being great, it's hard to dock him here. And then out of zone coverage, he looks great for the most part. While he will sometimes give too much of a cushion to his receiver here, he's very patient and will rarely overcommit to an assignment. And then when you combine all of this together, it shows scheme versatility as he can play both man and zone coverage. And it's not like he can just play both, he can play both at high levels. Adding on to that scheme versatility, but also his skill set as a whole, he also has some great athleticism. The best trait in Johnson's athletic profile is his explosiveness, which once again shows in his anticipation capabilities. Not only does he have the instincts to click and close efficiently, but even if he's a tad late, his explosiveness makes up for it. One thing I do want to mention is that he could be prone to holding on combo routes at the next level. He just has to control himself and stay consistent with the instincts if he wants to prevent that. Moving on, Johnson's game speed looks faster than his alleged 4.45 40-yard time. It feels like on nearly every vertical route, he's staying step by step and won't allow any significant separation. He looks like he runs a 4.3 when he's on the field, and backing that up is his agility. In that elusiveness, he does a great job starting and stopping on hesitation routes going deep. He also shows this when his back is to the QB, as he can mirror receivers just based on their footwork and not where the ball is, although this is a tad inconsistent, and as I said before, he looks uncomfortable when his back is to the QB. So when you combine this all together, you have a great athletic profile for the defensive back position. Unfortunately, it's not all sunshine and rainbows with Will Johnson as a prospect. While minor for the cornerback position, at least when compared to safety, his run support capabilities could use some work. This section isn't just on run support, as some of these traits can apply everywhere. That's why it says run support-ish. Positively, his pursuit is very solid, and there are times where he does a nice job in the gaps and finding angles for tackle attempts. There was one occurrence that should be on your screen, where he ran downfield with great pursuit against Texas to stop a potential rushing touchdown, although a touchdown was scored at the end of that drive. But speaking of that tackling, here's where I don't enjoy watching Johnson. Some of his tackling attempts aren't great, as he just fails to make that wrap-up tackle and will just bounce off the runner. The technique is what needs the most work, but the missed tackle rate of 15.7% won't intrigue scouts either. While he will get run over on some tackle attempts as well, his play strength isn't bad by any means. He does a nice job using physicality when defending routes, as well as when having to get off blocks from receivers, but he doesn't show it much at a high level, meaning this just pans out as average. And finally, we have Johnson's vitals. Same ol', same ol'. Johnson's measurables are fantastic, although he is a little skinny for the position. Nonetheless, being 6'2" will give him opportunities to play against different kinds of receivers at the next level. Johnson's medicals are obviously concerning, but it could be worse, and there are worse out of this first round group of corners. He missed half of the 2024 season with turf toe, and while it's not expected to linger into the beginning of his NFL career, we missed out on a potentially great 2024 campaign. Alignment versatility is fine, as while he won't play in the slot much, he has played a slim amount of snaps at strong safety, which he has the skill set and the frame for. Finally, his production is very good, and although he missed out on potentially more with his 2024 injury, it's still pretty dang good. The time has come. It is time for me to tell you which Michigan draft prospect is better. First off, here are Mason Graham's positives. And here are the negatives. Moving on, here are Will Johnson's positives. And now the negatives. As I mentioned before, it's hard to compare two different positions in this setting. It's kind of like comparing a running back and a tight end. Both of these guys are fantastic defenders, and it's going to depend on team priorities to see which one goes off the board first. But as I also mentioned before, one of these guys has to be higher on my big board. They can't just tie or anything. So, without further ado, the Michigan defender that I think is better as a 2025 NFL draft prospect is cornerback Will Johnson.